Lieutenant Michael Chen attended the Coalition Unity Ball on New Geneva Station because his commanding officer had insisted that someone from engineering needed to represent their division at formal functions. Michael hated these events: stiff formal wear, choreographed small talk, political maneuvering disguised as social interaction. But orders were orders. The ball was spectacular in that overwhelming way coalition events tended to be. Representatives from dozens of species, each with their own formal protocols and cultural expectations. Michael recognized some from his mandatory xenobiology briefings: the elegant Sylvani with their color-changing skin, the imposing Kyler warriors, the scholarly Thulmuri. And then there was a woman standing alone near the observation windows, watching the crowd with an expression that suggested she found the whole affair as exhausting as Michael did. She was striking in a way that transcended species aesthetics: pale skin with an almost luminescent quality, distinctive pointed ears, dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She wore formal attire that was clearly expensive but understated, no obvious status indicators or species delegation markers. She looked bored, lonely, like someone enduring obligation rather than enjoying celebration. Michael, emboldened by the 2 drinks he'd had and the solidarity of finding someone else who clearly didn't want to be here, approached her. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, offering his hand. "You look like you could use rescue from standing alone, watching everyone else pretend to have fun." The woman turned her full attention to him, those dark eyes assessing with an intensity that made Michael momentarily question his decision. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, just slightly but genuine. "I would like that," she said in accented but perfect coalition standard. "Thank you for asking." As Michael led the mysterious woman onto the dance floor, he realized several things. She moved with a grace that suggested either extensive training or natural predatory fluidity. She was slightly taller than him, and she radiated a kind of contained power that made him instinctively careful. But she also seemed genuinely pleased to be dancing, her expressions softening from initial wariness into something approaching enjoyment. "I'm Michael," he said, as they moved through the formal steps the coalition used for mixed-species dancing. "Engineering Division, USS Prometheus." "Lyria," she replied, offering no other identification. "I'm in a leadership position with my people." They danced in comfortable silence for a moment before Michael, never good at reading social cues but excellent at reading genuine emotion, said, "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." "Same here. Want to share what brings you to this particular circle of diplomatic hell?" Lyria laughed, a sound that was surprisingly warm despite her cool appearance. "Obligation. My position requires attendance at coalition functions. Yours? Similar. My commander thought someone from engineering should show the flag." "I drew the short straw." Michael grinned. "Though it's not as terrible as I expected. You're a much better dancer than the last diplomat who spent 10 minutes stepping on my feet while discussing trade tariff reform." "I've had practice," Lyria said, and there was something in her tone that suggested centuries of practice, though she looked no older than early 30s by human standards. As they continued dancing, Michael noticed other attendees watching them with expressions ranging from curiosity to shock. He assumed it was because he was dancing with someone clearly out of his social league. She had that aristocratic bearing that screamed, important person. What he didn't know was that people were staring because Lyria was Lady Serathvin, the vampire queen of the Night Court, one of the most feared and powerful beings in coalition space. Her species were legendary predators known for feeding on other species, and her diplomatic presence was tolerated only because attempting to exclude vampires would be politically catastrophic. And she was dancing with a human engineer who clearly had no idea who she was. The dance ended, but Lyria suggested they continue talking on the observation deck, where it was quieter. Michael agreed readily, pleased to escape the crowded ballroom. On the observation deck, with stars wheeling past the station's viewports, they talked for over an hour. Lyria asked about engineering, about Earth, about Michael's reasons for joining coalition service. Michael asked about her leadership position, about her species, which she identified as Setharai, a name Michael vaguely recognized but couldn't place. It was the most genuine conversation Michael had had at a coalition event. No political maneuvering, no careful calculation, just two people who found each other tolerable in a sea of exhausting formality. Then Lyria's communicator chimed urgently. She checked it, and her expression shifted to something harder, more aligned with that initial predatory assessment. "I need to return to my delegation," she said, and there was command in her voice now. "There's apparently a situation requiring my attention." "Of course," Michael said, disappointed but understanding duty. "Thank you for the dance and conversation. This was the best part of my evening." Lyria looked at him for a long moment. "Michael Chen, you invited a stranger to dance without asking who she was or what she represented. You spoke to me as a person rather than a position. That's rare, especially for my kind." Before Michael could ask what she meant, Lyria's delegation arrived, and Michael's xenobiology training kicked in with horrifying recognition. The delegation members were clearly Setharai, vampires, not metaphorical predators, but actual vampires who fed on other species' blood and life force, whose abilities included enhanced strength, predatory instincts, and centuries-long lifespans. And Lyria, the woman he'd just spent an hour casually chatting with, was clearly their leader. The delegation members treated her with deference that suggested extremely high status. Lady Sarathvin, the vampire queen, Michael had been dancing with and casually conversing with one of the most powerful and feared beings in coalition space, treating her like just another lonely person at a party. Michael's first instinct was pure horror at his own ignorance. His second was to back away slowly and hope he hadn't caused a diplomatic incident by treating the vampire queen like a regular person. But before he could do either, Lyria, Lady Sarathvin, dismissed her delegation with a gesture and turned back to him. "You look like you've just realized who I am," she observed, amusement in her voice. "Yes, Your Majesty," Michael managed, defaulting to formal address. "I apologize if I was inappropriate." "You were genuine," Lyria interrupted. "You asked me to dance because I looked lonely, not because of who I am. You spoke to me about engineering challenges and terrible station coffee instead of carefully navigating political implications." Her dark eyes held his. "Do you know how long it's been since anyone treated me like a person rather than a threat or political tool?" Michael said the most honest thing he could. "You were alone at a party where everyone else was dancing. Seemed like the right thing to do." Lyria laughed genuinely, and her delegation members exchanged shocked glances. "The right thing to do? Yes." She stepped closer. "Michael Chen, you've done something remarkable tonight. You've reminded me what it feels like to be seen as Lyria rather than Lady Sarathvin, vampire queen, existential threat to be carefully managed." She offered her hand formally. "I owe you thanks for that, and perhaps, if you're willing, we might continue our conversation at a future function. I find I enjoy talking to someone who doesn't calculate implications of every word." Michael took her hand despite the tremor in his own. "I'd like that, Your Majesty, though I should probably read up on proper protocols so I don't accidentally cause an interstellar incident next time. You may call me Lyria in private conversation," she said, her smile showing just the hint of fangs Michael had somehow missed. "Formality is exhausting enough without applying it to the one person who's treated me normally in decades." News of the human engineer who asked the vampire queen to dance spread across coalition diplomatic circles. Some saw it as hilarious example of human ignorance. Others saw it as surprisingly savvy diplomatic move, though those who knew Michael realized it was pure accident. But among those who dealt with Lady Sarathvin, it became something else. Proof that the feared vampire queen valued genuine connection over political calculation, and that maybe vampires were more complicated than their reputation suggested. When reporters asked Michael about dancing with one of the most feared beings in coalition space, he gave his honest answer. "I didn't know who she was. I just saw someone standing alone at a party, and it seemed decent to ask if she wanted to dance." Turns out decent kindness works across species, even when one of those species is vampires. Lyria, when asked about the human who approached her without fear, said, "Michael Chen saw a person before seeing a predator or political entity. That genuine sight, that willingness to offer simple kindness without agenda, it's more disarming than any weapon." It reminded me that beneath the titles and roles, we're all just people trying to navigate complex situations. Because they'd learned that innocence and genuine connection can disarm even the most powerful predator. that treating someone as a person rather than their reputation can reshape fear into understanding. And that sometimes the most